Hey folks, so I'd not really planned on making a video on this project, but it turned into a good learning experience for me, so I thought I'd probably pass it on to everyone else. It also ended up being really pretty. However, my utter lack of planning also means that most of this video is photography and commentary, with a little bit of actual video thrown in here and there. For my PBS nerds out there, you can consider it my Ken Burns episode. I'll provide as clear a view of the design and build process as I can, and hopefully this will spark some ideas for those of you who might think that a small machine can only be used for small projects. This is a design idea that's been rattling around in my head for a long time. I wanted to have something that combined my two big passions, music and woodworking. The goal was to take some of my favorite album covers and turn them into a coffee table. I enlisted the help of my buddy Dave Evans and his amazing Glowforge laser cutter to make the individual record covers. As a side note, I have to hype Dave a bit, as he makes some of the most crazy, interesting, and beautiful things I've ever seen. He has an amazing amount of skill and imagination, and we have a tremendous amount of fun doing show and tell every few weeks. So with Dave's dedication and skill, the hardest part of this for me was narrowing things down to 50 album covers. This might sound easy to you, but given that my record collection is a little over 2,000 albums at this point, it was a pretty stressful process. After a lot of agonizing and a few test cuts and engraves, Dave created the final batch of covers, and I was ready to get started. Step 1 was picking out a nice set of cherry boards for the top. I also needed to cut a series of pockets in each board to fit the individual covers. The challenge here is how to cut pockets in 40-inch boards when your machine has a 16-inch square work surface. In practice, this limitation is a bit of an illusion. While you're limited by the rails in terms of the width you can work on, if you can align things consistently, your usable length can be virtually limitless. Here's what I mean by that. To make a consistent set of 9 pockets in each board, I created a jig that would let me cut 3 pockets at a time. I could then slide the board through the back of the machine and use the last pocket to line up the piece with a small spacer and cut the next 3 pockets. Each of the pockets was cut out with a 1/4-inch bit and then a 1/16 inch bit, which was used to carve out the corners of the pockets and kind of square things up a bit. The spacer was designed to be the same width as the distance between each of my 3 pockets. There were some small slots on the jig on either side of the board that let me drop my spacer in and ensure that everything aligned as expected, and then I could cut the next set of pockets. I glued up a set of thinner boards to make a set of 2-inch thick legs. Each one was 16 inches long and milled so that each side was the same thickness, roughly about 2 inches. For my next trick, I needed to cut a design towards the top of each leg as an accent. The design is there just for a little bit of extra decoration, and it appears on the outside 2 faces of each leg. I made a second jig to hold each leg, so that the decoration would match and align perfectly on the 2 outer sides of the leg. Because the legs were so thick, this jig had to leave an opening all the way down to the spoil board, otherwise I couldn't raise the bit high enough to clear the leg. I was also planning on using a mortise and tenon joint to attach the legs to the frame that would run under the table. I used this same jig to line up and cut the mortise slots for each leg. I cut the rest of the frame pieces and the tenons on the bandsaw just because it was easier to do there. The last piece I needed to CNC was the opening in each side of the table for hiding the various remote controls and some coasters. I made one last jig that let me center that opening and the pockets for the 2 support rails that would run on either side of the opening. Everything else was cut by hand or on the bandsaw. The project did take a couple of months and had more than a few small production delays. I also lost one of the covers when a not-so-small furry demon named Rory decided to gnaw on it. In the end, everything was restored, and finally, the last piece was put into place. Alright, and now, like the last Infinity Stone, dun dun, dun,
Dun, dun. It is done.
A few coats of finish and a surprisingly tense epoxy pour, and I had my finished table. I was even able to use the extra covers to make some coasters. In short, I'm very pleased with the way this turned out, and I'm very happy to discover that even furniture is possible on my regular Shapeoko 3 machine. Hopefully this will inspire a few of you to push the envelope as well, and I will see you next time.